Hello everyone, this is Dragon Videos and welcome back to another wonderful segment. All of you who've been watching my videos have probably already got tired of some of the Owl House stuff. So for this video, I'm going to focus on something a little different this time. For some of you who had been watching my Barbarian and The Troll video, then you're in luck. The Barbarian and the Troll has become insanely popular right now, especially considering the fact that it's only been out for a few months. There hasn't been any confirmation that there's going to have the season 2, but there is some hope for it. So with this show, it's very memorable, the characters are very interesting and colorful, the story is simple but yet easy to follow, as well as it has a fresh take on puppetry, as well as a form of storytelling where it kind of has some very good jokes where they're not groan-inducing. For this video, I'm going to go over some of the best episodes that the show had offered thus far. Bear in mind, there can be some spoilers ahead. Everyone has their own form of fear, and it is very difficult to kind of express them or being honest because some people can be ashamed of them, and it's kind of understandable. In this case, in this episode, there was a lot of fear facing that this crew had to do for their quest. So Brendar and the crew have found themselves at the Swamp of Fear, which they have to actually cross in order to get to Narlia, the ex-wife of Horus the Great, as well as trying to make sure that they go there in one piece. The trick is that you literally have to face whatever fear is thrown at you, and this is your own personal fears. It didn't affect Devon much, but with Brendar, she was trying to come to terms with her own personal fears about letting other people get close to her. And of course, it resulted in her having to separate with them for a while, but after seeing people gather around the big goblet along with a small family, this results in Brendar having a change of heart and deciding to have the crew come with her, even though she still has yet to share her personal fears with them. It still didn't change a lot, and I felt like this is probably one of the biggest episodes, but best, and mostly because it just definitely was where Brendar opens up to the crew. Like every other show, it's always important to have a very good first episode, something that could actually have people be interested and invested into this show, and with Brendar the Barbarian, it was no exception. It did a nice job of introducing Brendar to the show, as well as what she has to deal with. Of course, being stripped of her title, Brendar had little choice but to find a new sword and take on the role of Barbarian. And she finds herself into the Queen's Quarter, feeling extremely depressed that she needs to get to her journey of avenging her brother and her fallen mother. And of course, in order to do that, she needs proper weapons. And then of course you have Evan, who tries to be a reasonable troll of trying to have the toll being paid by the toll bridge. I know, imagine that being a tongue twister. And he tried to use a song as a form of payment, but, well... Oh, that's gotta hurt. As you can definitely tell, Evan really stinks at being a bridge troll, and he's even aware of it himself. His father isn't exactly pleased, and he's the king of trolls. This guy is a piece of work, and that's kind of an understatement when you get to episode 6. So anyway, Evan tries to have a civil conversation with his father, trying to convince him maybe he was just better off being a musician than being someone who collects all the tolls, which was very believable, but resulted in bridges being burned. And then of course we get Stacy. 3 of the questers immediately introduced in one episode, which definitely is a very crazy conundrum at that point. Anyway, Stacy tries to convince Brendar to come for a special quest that has required Brendar's use. And of course, Evan tries to find his own quest of finding better songs to do. He even goes as far as trying to have a gig, even though if it means dealing with an audience that tries to kill him at the Queen's Goiter. He even goes as far as trying to help Brendar with her fight by distracting Skelly by smacking him lopside with his lute, the one thing he cares about at that point. Definitely shows of how much Evan cares about Brendar. So overall, I feel like this episode is pretty good, and it definitely helps introduce the characters in a way that was both explanatory as well as showing. They even go as far as explaining that exploration joke about that. But I put it further up on this list, mostly because there are some episodes that kind of flesh out the characters more. So this episode kicks off where episode 1, Brendar the Barbarian, left off. So Brendar has a serious talk with Evan and trying to say that this Gothmoria is a dangerous place and that he should be more careful because he is prone to danger. And it's true, he had lived a sheltered life. So we are introduced to Horus the Great, a wizard who has interesting skills to say the least. He is pretty good at showing his stuff and is surprisingly different from the usual stereotypical wizards we're familiar with in fantasy. And of course we're introduced to Axe as well, which is why I put it further down the list. It shows great introduction to each of the characters. And of course at the time, Axe is proclaimed as a double-bladed demon chopper, and so the group goes on a quest to take on Narlia, the ex-wife of Horus. Unbeknownst to them, they run into some tree trouble. Evan winds up getting eaten and the rest of the crew practically dangling in the limbs of a horrible tree. But thankfully though, Evan had managed to find a certain special way of trying to get out of this predicament. So the reason why Off to See the Wizard is number 6 on this list is mostly because of the fact that Evan definitely shows that despite the fact that he lived a sheltered life and isn't exactly the most physically abled fighter, he does try to use whatever skills he has in order to survive Gothmoria, and it was also thanks to him that Brendar had a bit more faith in him. Not only that, but we had more introduction of some characters and a nice little world building of what to expect next with Brendar and the questing crew. So, after a long hike through the Swamp of Fear and a very long and exhausting journey, the crew finally reached Narlia the Witch's place, only to be surprised and met by Steve the Knight, who is apparently the boyfriend of Narlia, much to the dismay of Horace. So, Stacy managed to convince him to stay and then, of course, face off Narlia, which definitely resulted in an interesting battle as the two were fighting for not custody of Stacy, but more of a custody of the amulet in hopes of turning Stacy back to normal, along with Brendar having to be part of a fight, but had to take on Steve in order to do so, thus resulting in a very interesting climax.
This is what you call a party foul.
That jam session with Evan and Steve was pretty cute. That's for sure.
Encouraging us to melt each other's faces off is not a great way to get your father and I back together.
Yes, you could have burned off my luxurious beard. A wizard without a beard. Can you imagine?
Come on, did you guys enjoy seeing each other a little? Oh.
So the reason why I put it at number 5 on this list is mostly because of Stacy. Her situation is so relatable to a lot of kids who have separate or divorced parents. They have a hard time coping with having to deal with taking sides of the particular parent depending on that situation, or in some cases having to learn of how to become a proper family despite being separated. And I feel like in a lot of ways this is a small character growth for Stacy because of the situation she's been through. So, in the world of Gothmoria, dragons are considered dishonest and manipulative creatures who will burn fire on you. And of course, unfortunately for Brendar and the crew, they have to make this dragon cry in order to get the magical tears that Brendar needs in order for Axe to take down Alvin and chop them up into pieces. But first, they have to do some grocery shopping in order to appease the dragon, unbeknownst to them of what fate will happen. And so, remember what we had to deal with in the Swamp of Fear? And the reason why I put it at number 4 is mostly because this episode really talks about Brendar's backstory, the so-called complicated backstory. It turns out she actually hid herself away when her brother was kidnapped and her mother was killed by Alvin the demon. And you can't help but feel so bad for Brendar. I mean, it wasn't her fault. This was a situation she couldn't control. She was a kid at the time, so what could she do against a demon that's supposedly a loose cannon and could actually kill you if you look at her funny? So there's definitely a lot of sympathy that us as the audience, as well as Evan, have to express towards Brendar at the end of a show. And of course, The dragon, being touched by all of this togetherness, was able to produce the tears that Axe needed in order to take on the foe up ahead. Not before Brendar was able to do some butt kicking that had for the dragon himself, and I have no comments on that considering I'm a dragon myself here. But I do have to appreciate the fact that there is some good world building in this show. That I can tell you that much. So basically, this picks off after the events of Ma Sharon Ah. Evan gets very concerned for the mental health of his friend, so in order to help Brendar on her quest, he decides to go through find the dragon's tears. Unfortunately, it involves going through some troll bridges. And of course, it would mean having to get a troll pass from his father. And of course, after what had happened in the first episode, it is understandable of why Evan is so hesitant. And plus, when you learn about the home life he's lived in, it's no wonder he wants to break off this toxic relationship he has with his dad. Finally, he has the guts to ask him for the past, and it resulted in a big sacrifice.
Oh, I don't think you'll want this back. Delicious. A little stringy.
All right, just...
But wait, just to add insult to injury, Evan's dad practically ate the troll pass right in front of him. It was finally up to that point that Evan had the last straw with his dad. He's patient, but he's finally fed up with every tar that he had to be dealing with at this point, which definitely shows he made the right decision of leaving his toxic family.
because she is right.
Yes, she is.
I'm sorry if I don't fit into your neat little drawer, Dad. I will always love you, but I will never come back to this house.
It was even up to the point where his wife, the queen of the trolls, had enough of his BS.
I know it's a little harsh. It's for his own good. Geraldina, no, no.
Get it, girl.
So you could say, despite the fact that his mom wants to eat him, his mom practically is the only person that loves him and actually sees him wanting to have a better life. And of course, after what's said and done, Brendar and Axe actually make up. But putting that aside, I feel like one of the biggest highlights in the episode that made it such a great one is because of the fact that Evan had some major character development. In the beginning, he was a little sheepish and shy around his dad, but then over time begins to become more confident in his ability and a little bit firm. He's still a little easygoing, but it is getting better up to the point where he actually stands up for himself, no matter how many times he's bullied by his own family. After a very long journey, as well as having to deal with some flurs, the crew finally found Alvin's lair, ready to take her on, but they do find themselves having to engage in a series of lot of traps, one treacherous than the last. And of course, interestingly enough, and I thought to point it out, is how each of the traps seem to complement one member of the party, where one member fails, the other succeeds in. So here is exactly one of the best examples with what had been happening with Evan and Stacy.
Maybe hold it down. Sorry, I need you to do this faster. I'm right there. I got it. I'm gonna get it.
Come on, Evan. Come on.
And so, another thing that helped was when Stacy was able to solve one of the riddles in the riddle part of the cave. Again, this episode was so amazing with not only setting up the eyes in a way which still showed some life to the puppets, but also how they show the great teamwork that the team has put into the efforts of rescuing Kendar as well as overcoming any hurdle.
If we don't go now, we'll be trapped here forever.
Forever! I've got too much music to share with the world! Don't ever give up, my dream!
Evan the Troll. Fly or die. Let's go, let's go.
The relationship with Kendar and Brendar was very cute and sweet. Despite their years of separation, they still had a solid bond for each other and are still trying to be very supportive. Unfortunately, Kendar was soon met up with Alvin with one simple task, thus resulting in a very brilliant and somewhat sad ending to this entire episode. Okay, you feel really bad for Kendar in this episode. He tries his hardest to help his sister out, but thanks to his Stockholm Syndrome, he failed to realize that Alvin tricked him into giving Axe. Because what Brendar says, after we soon learn, is that demons lie, thus resulting in poor Axe being stuck in a dungeon, as well as being trapped with two quarreling inmates. So, yeah, poor Axe was not having the time of her life right now, and in the meantime, everyone was frantically searching for her, Brendar using every ounce of her power to actually go over and practically put posters up, asking for help from the lab civilizations, even going to Queen Shimmerine. Well,
That song came with choreography. Go on. We are the princess warriors. We really love our queen. She gives us fancy outfits and haters the guillotine.
Bravo!
oh dear God. Anyone else feel like this is a drunken version of 99 bottles of beer on the wall with a sparkle of glitter put into it and practically had soul sucked out? Cause that's what's basically going on here, and I feel so bad for Brenda. No wonder she doesn't want to be singing that out with them. Unfortunately, things did not go well, and Brendar soon had help from Sharon, who was finally fed up of the treatment that Queen Shimmerine had handed to her. And of course they tried to make an escape, but soon confronted Queen Shimmerine about their antics. It was even up to the point where Evan was calling out Queen Shimmerine as for being associated with the demon, which I'm pretty sure some of us were thinking earlier in the episodes since my Sharona. But the Queen's response to all this is...
Working with Elvin? Oh, you silly purple troll. You really have no idea who I am, do you?
This results in the most ingenious reveal in the form of song as well as the transition that is flat out amazing.
It's such a hoot to shoot my girls in the back, boys in the couch in my lap, be the wolf in grandma's cap. Oh, queen, what big eyes you have! I need you through and through, nothing I hate more than you. While you were out questing, I was robbing your heart. I can't feel bad, 'cause it's just too good. I can't feel bad. You are all my puppets, and it's just too good. You're broken, and I love it, 'cause it's just too good.
So, could you imagine the amount of hours it took for the puppeteers, let alone for the designers, to actually do this frame by frame to make it look almost organic? That's crazy. Not only that, but it was a very good episode overall, and I put it number 1 because this definitely is where the tone went from lighthearted and funny to something almost dark and serious. Not up to the level of Dark Crystal, but pretty much up there, because we're now fearing for the worst for Brendar and the crew, and as well as finally learning the reveal about Alvin. Even the presence alone is not something to disappoint at. And if there's a season 2, I'm pretty sure she'll take a terrifying turn. So these are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. What do you think are the best episodes from The Barbarian and The Troll? Do subscribe, do a like, as well as remember to do some comments below. This is Dragon Videos, signing off.